Wait, are you are you gonna count me in? Whatever. I'm just gonna go for it. Welcome to the Queen's Lead podcast. I'm your host, Amy Singleton, and as a child of the 80s, I'd love to say queens rule, but they don't. Queens lead. Being a queen means you are worthy to be a leader of people. The guests on our show do exactly that. They are leading the way in their businesses, families, and communities. And they're taking their rightful place in the spotlight, leading and inspiring the developing queens in all of us. Welcome to the Queen's Lead podcast.
Now here's your host, Amy Singleton, the queen of realness, leading conversations about business, life, and the real shit you want to know.
Everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Queen's Lead podcast. I'm your host, Amy Singleton, and today we have a very special guest for you. Margaret Graziano is a best-selling author. She is a podcaster. She's the CEO of Keen Alignment, and she is really changing up the things in the culture world. If I hear one more person complaining about the way they're treated at work or how they hate going into work, I actually had a friend the other day say that there's this new kind of conspiracy as everyone's coming in the door about the CEO. How's her attitude today? And I'm like, that is the sinking stomach feeling that nobody wants to feel, that Margaret is helping people to overcome. So welcome, Margaret.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. And you said you were about to go to Italy pretty soon?
Sicily. So it is Italy.
Sicily.
It's considered Italy, but they consider themselves their own country.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I love it. I love it. Well, congratulations. Very well-deserved trip. But let's talk some more about that, that thinking feeling that a lot of people have in their stomach when they're going to work right now.
Yeah. So I have to just put a caveat out there that the CEOs also have that sinking feeling as well.
Guaranteed. Yes, they do.
You own a business like I do. So every single person makes or breaks culture. And it is true, when the leader is having a dark day, the leader should not go to work that day because they're contagious. Yeah. They contaminate the space with their energy, but so does every single employee. If you're operating in I don't want to be here, I can't stand this place, well, people can feel that. It does impact your mind share. It impacts your ability to be creative, and it impacts your ability for people to want to work with you. So it's it's an epidemic, actually. Burnout, overwhelm, a lack of engagement, feeling like you have to go to work and you're a prisoner. And I think the outside world has just as much to do with it as the inside world in the company.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I kind of jumped a little bit ahead of where I wanted to be, but that just, when she said that to me last week, it just stuck in my mind like, wow, it's been a long time since I've had to work in a corporate environment that wasn't my own. So I haven't felt that, but I remember feeling that when I worked as a nurse in the hospital. So I want to rewind back a few years and talk about little girl Margaret. Where did you come from? How did we get here? I know you just launched a brand new website. And it's beautiful, I must say. I love your brand colors. Everything's so vibey on there. But you talk a little bit about kind of that traumatic background that you had and kind of coming up as a child. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd like to start in the middle and then go backwards. And so I would say the middle is, I'm about 19 years old. I get pregnant. My mom says, "How the hell did that happen?" And I said, "Well, let me tell you about the birds and the bees." She was like this, not staunch Catholic, but boy, that day when I told her I was pregnant, the staunch Catholic came out, and it was, "You have to get married." And
Wow.
I didn't have my own voice. I didn't want to get married. It was like they were pushing me down the aisle, and I was saying, I heard the Graduate song in my head, "Hello,
Wow.
darkness, my old friend." And so
Yeah.
that marriage lasted 12 months. The guy had 22 different jobs. He was a not competent to be a father or a provider. And so my brother and his wife kind of broke me out of that trap, which was all an illusion in my head, which we may or may not get to. But I got a job in recruiting, and I took that drive to support that kid, that child, my first son, David. And that drive carried me through for a 25-year career as a top producer. Now let's go back to the childhood. The reason I share that recruiting is everyone in my family became a pretty high achiever. My sister's the only one who hasn't started her own business, my oldest, but she was the #1 teacher in her region. She got the Apple Award. My sister Laura, entrepreneur. My brother John, entrepreneur. My little sister Dawn, entrepreneur. So we all grew up to be these drivers, these achievers. Nobody was going to tell us what to do. Well, if we rewind back to 1970, I was 6 years old, and in the midst of this war zone in my household. My dad was an addict. He was a functioning addict. When I say functioning, I mean only in the realm of earning a living. He owned a plumbing company, and he went out and we lived in a big house, and we had a pool, and we had snowmobiles, and we had really good food all the time. The refrigerator was never empty, but he was violent. And when he was either coming off the drugs or didn't have enough drug, I don't know, because I'm not an addict, but he would like soar in these insatiable anger things, and all of us would just freeze. And I remember one night, little kid, to this day, we're all trying to pinpoint the exact day. But I remember being in my bedroom and feeling like there was 4 bedrooms. We were all in our own bedroom, and we had these vents in between the walls, so we could talk to each other through the vents. So I was woken up in the middle of the night, and he was beating the living hell out of my mom, and she was screaming for him not to kill her. And I remember like being alone. I mean, totally alone, because nobody was whispering in the vents. And I was just like as a little girl, I was like comforting myself, which was strange. Turns up that the next day, when my mom was in her bed with black and blue marks all over her face, and those old-fashioned like water bottles, like water pack, you pour the water in, and it's like an ice pack. And her mother and her father said, "How could this have happened from a car accident?" And I said, "It didn't happen from a car accident. Dad hit her." And my mother, you could have seen daggers come from her eyes right into my soul. And I stopped saying what I felt and what I saw, and I kind of held it all in and was kind of an angry kid.
I bet.
It was crazy. Now let's fast forward to 36 years old and above. At 36 years old, I was running a recruiting company, and I had been to a conference, and this guy was an amazing trainer. He had a hula hoop set up here and a hula hoop set up here, and he told all these recruiters, Group A, take all the resources out of this hula hoop and put it in this hula hoop. Group B, take all the resources out of this hula hoop and put it in this hula hoop. And chaos ensued, and I was brought right back to my childhood. And I removed myself from the exercise, and I looked at it and I said, I don't want to be part of chaos, but this is what recruiting seems like to me. And that was the beginning of my journey, of my 10-year journey to leave the industry, even though I was highly successful, and to get into something that was a little more on the healing journey versus the transaction journey. To be successful as a headhunter, as a recruiter in executive search, you are in the hustle. I was coaching someone today. She said #hustle, but hers was in a good way. If you're not outrunning the day in recruiting, you're not making money. And it was the perfect career for somebody who was born into trauma, because it was always outrunning and having this crazy sense of urgency. And I didn't know it was a problem for me until I was 36 years old. And I changed the way I did business after that. 10 years later, I sold that company and took the hiring process that I had developed, which was a slowing down to know who you were really hiring and why you were hiring them. And I took it to Silicon Valley. But the point of this little girl, Margaret, is I had a Vedic a Vedic coach slash astrology guy. I'm not astronomy, astrology.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he said, you were born into trauma, a war zone actually, and you had a dark energy force and a light energy force. And he said, in you, I see the light one. And that resonated like a sword cutting right through me. And I remember
Oh,
as a little kid, I was angry, I was in fear, I was trying so desperately for people to like me. I would do whatever they
mm,
told me to do. Not until like 36 did I get my voice. Even though I
yeah,
was successful in sales and recruiting, the
yeah,
voice was in service of survival. It wasn't in service of what was in my highest and best self. So that's a really
yeah.
long answer, but
No, that's a beautiful answer. What is it about the mid-30s that like something just for me, it was about that same age as well that something just kind of clicked and like I got it all of a sudden. What was it? Was there an incident that happened at age 36 that kind of was the catalyst for all of that
yeah, I
finding?
brought that I brought that guy. I liked his exercise, and I called him and said, "I want you to come into my company and help me because I have 14 employees. I'm the number one performer. My
Mhm.
overhead is huge. It was like 30 grand a month just to run this place, and I was the
Yeah.
only one generating revenue for the company. Like 98% of
Mm,
the revenue was coming from me, but I had 14 people.
yeah.
And so he came into the office. He was there 2 days. At the end of the second day, he shut my office door and he sat down and he said, "Which one of your parents is the addict?" And I said, "How dare you?" It was my dad. And he invited me
Wow.
to do a 4-day workshop that was an inquiry into what it meant to be human and what was behind my thoughts, my beliefs, my behavior. And in that wasn't a retreat, in that inquiry, I saw that I had made myself into a money-making machine. I was a mom, I had kids, I was remarried at the time, but everything was about earning, 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 and of course, I attracted a man who was more comfortable being home than working 2 jobs to support us, because he
Yeah.
made less money than I did. I could have quit my job, but it would have meant he, in order to support us in the way we wanted to live, would have had to carry 2 jobs, and so I was I set up my whole life to be a survivor, including who I attracted as a husband. Um,
Mm,
and so the struggle became more the struggle became so uncomfortable just to just to not to produce results, but to have a life that I felt like I was being there for my kids and being there for me. I remember
mhm.
the only friends I had at that time were people who were fellow recruiters. I had no
Yeah.
social life. It was like everything was duty, 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 duty. There was no I wouldn't have even known what the word intrinsic value was then. And
Yeah.
everything I was working for everything else besides my own fulfillment. When I got in touch with my own fulfillment, it actually took a decade to take action.
Mm.
I d
Wow.
I improved, like, I got much more compassionate. I got
Yeah.
more clear with people about boundaries. Like, if they weren't
Mhm.
gonna produce, then they couldn't work at my company. It didn't have to be a drama, and it wasn't a personal attack on me. It was, "No,
Yeah.
here's what you need to do. Here's what the business needs you to do. Yes
Mhm.
or no?"
Yeah.
But it wasn't like that before. Before that, it was a struggle, and I always made it about me, and they were purposely not doing their job, which was all bullshit. They People were doing the best they could with what they
Yeah.
had, and
Yeah.
I was attracting this is the other thing about being stuck in past trauma. I was attracting other people's trauma, like attracts
Mm.
like. So the guy said I was codependent. I was hiring people who were dependent on me, not looking
Yeah.
to be colleagues with me. Like my business now, everyone's a colleague. Nobody
Yeah.
works here who doesn't contribute. But for years and years and years, I attracted people who were sycophants or sycophants, whatever it's called, sucking the life
Yeah.
out of
Yeah.
me. They weren't bad people, but they were not contributing. They were taking. And that was all
Wow.
on me. And everyone's trauma shows up different in their own leadership and in their own business.
Yeah.
Some could be the maniacal workaholic. Some could be a complete codependent environment. Some could be that they can never accomplish anything because their view of themselves is that they weren't good enough. So,
Wow.
anyway, yeah.
Yeah, that's like a whole lot to unpack, like not only as a leader, you know, which is what the women listening to this podcast are all leaders, whether they're a leader of their own business, of a nonprofit, or, you know, even in the corporate world. I believe, did you refer to yourself as a corporate dropout at some point when we
Um,
were talking before?
I only worked in corporate
Yeah.
for 1 year. I worked at
1
Allstate,
year.
and there
You
was
were
just
like,
no
I'm
way.
dropping out early. Like there's no way you're not going to fit
I
there.
what I was earning versus like how I got into recruiting, I went to a party, and this
Wow.
woman who was a kind of a burnout in high school, a lot of marijuana, nice girl, but I never looked at her as a super high achiever. She was
Yeah.
bragging about how much money she was making at this party. And I said to myself, if she can make 150,000, I could make
I sure as
200.
hell can,
And
right?
and
Yeah.
so I said, I want your job. And that's how I got into recruiting.
That's what she was
And
doing, was recruiting?
yeah, and we were
Wow.
placing all of these people in corporate jobs, but all the recruiters were making double and triple what the people they were placing were making. And again, think
Wow.
about single mother, needed to support the kid, needed to do something, and I saw this as my only option. And gosh,
Yeah.
when I learned about coaching 20 years later, I thought for sure coaching wouldn't pay money. Like, I can only do that when I retire because nobody will
Yeah.
pay for that service. Boy, was I
Right.
wrong.
Boy, I'll tell you that. I mean, like, there is nothing that has moved me forward faster in my business or my life than paying someone like you who has been there and done that. I mean, there is absolutely zero substitution, no master's degree, no doctorate degree,
That's right.
no course, no anything is a substitute for some girl who's been there and can just tell you the way. Like, just show me the way.
Yeah, or
And
ask,
it's expensive, but it's so much cheaper in the long run, right?
yes, or ask the questions that would have one realize that one is out of alignment. So when just as you're talking right now, I'm picturing all of the leaders that coached me, all of these people from all the immersion courses I've taken. I added it up. It's about $800,000 just on
Wow.
classes and
Yeah.
trainings and certifications. But they were all real world. Like I am also a college. I finished college, but not the way other people would finish college. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, way over a lot of time. But the people that were there for me, I went through a corporate lawsuit where I had a guy from Silicon Valley try to pirate my software and turn it
Wow.
into something it wasn't supposed to be doing. The woman who helped me get through that lawsuit, amazing coach, an amazing coaching that I would have never gotten had I not had her. The guy who asked me which one of my parents was an addict before that, that was something I was pushing down. I had moved on. That was nothing to do with me. And even up to where I am right now, I've got coaches for public speaking. I've got coaches that help me with my online presence. I mean, the only way home is with the guidance of a support system. I mean, if there's anything I've learned in my life, going at
Yeah,
it alone
100%.
is really painful in
Yeah,
time and money.
definitely. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And there are those out there that just need to learn their own mistakes, but if you're willing to learn from someone else, you might as well pay a coach and just get through it the easier way.
Yeah, it's an exponential leap, actually. I am working with this female right now. I believe someday she will be an entrepreneur. And she comes out of McKinsey, high end. She's now a CFO. She's working for a really good company. They pay really well, but they have added so many if you ever watched Billions, those kind of people they have on the team. It's an investment company, and
Mhm.
everybody's got this ego and they got to get things done. And she's communicating, like, we got a culture issue here. The people that are reporting to us, they're overwhelmed, they're burnt out. And she wasn't making any headway at all by speaking
Mm.
that way. She heard me she saw me, I came into the company, did a presentation. She said, I want you to be my coach. We started with her, then 7 of the people that report to her, then 5 of the people that report to them. Now we're transforming
Yeah.
the entire department, bringing in people from other parts of the world. And she's getting traction because
Yeah.
she's changing her approach rather than saying we don't have a great culture. She's not telling people what she's doing. They're demonstrating their behavioral changes. She's
Yeah.
inviting people in to participate. And one by one, my phone is ringing with people who do not work in her department saying, I need a coach. I need a coach. And I don't coach all of them. I have a
Yeah.
cohort of people, a network of contribution where
Yeah.
they are on my team, but they're not my
Yeah.
employees.
Yeah.
They're independent coaches who want to be part of this community.
Yeah.
And it really, really works. And her team is fluidly gaining momentum and adding on. And it's just so good to see. But she needed a coach to help her see what she couldn't see. And as a
Yeah.
woman in a man's world, she was doing like this pouting. She didn't know she was doing it. Over talking like I'm probably doing right now.
We do that, don't we?
She
I
would
do
over
that.
explain herself, and her boss,
Yes.
who's a CEO man, said, you got to stop talking so much. And
Oh, that's so crushing, isn't it? Especially when they're right, when you're going, God, I know I am talking too much. My husband says to
doing,
me all the time, like, if you find yourself saying the word because, shut up. And I'm like, oh God, you're so right. Like you're over
yeah,
explaining again. Just be confident in that. You can
yeah,
do this.
yes. And I can speak for her, but she's such a good role model of other women. It's this, do I have a right to be in the room? I'm the only woman on the executive team.
Yeah.
Do I have the right to be here? Questioning that. Does what I have to say provide value? Will they accept what I have to say? And so all of that noise was actually getting in her way.
Yeah.
And so now things are different. There are times I get an SOS. I'm going into a meeting. Can you ground me? Of course I can. But the
I need
grounding
you on the
call
horn right now.
now the grounding call is 7 minutes, where 7 months ago it was an hour.
Wow.
So it's like,
Wow. That's incredible. Yeah. Just move. When the leaders move, the team is able to move, right? I mean, I think so many leaders are just like going, I have a friend that's a local business owner, and she said to me one time, like, my employees can you just come in and teach them not to be dumb? And I was like, oh God, here we go. Like, let's start with, like you said, it so often takes this third party to come in and ask some questions that reveal in us the, for lack of a better word, the conviction that maybe we need to feel about our own behavior, thoughts, actions, whatever that is as a leader.
yeah. So it's so interesting that you say that, Amy. In the book Ignite Culture, that's my current book. I have a new book in queue, which we don't even know the name right now. It's the Millennial Heiress. It will change.
I love
But
it.
the current book, it's got 3 sections. And the first section is, to transform a culture, you need to transform your leader within. So the whole first section is about me, 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 me. What's important
Yeah.
to me? What do I want? How do I get in my own way? I
Mm.
have more female readers than male readers. Guys will buy the book, but the women are the ones calling me, asking for
Wow.
coaching. The
Yeah.
second portion of that book is, how is my team interacting? Are we a reflection of our values? Are we a reflection of our ultimate intent or noble cause of the company? And are we bringing people along? And mostly, leadership teams are a little off base with what everyone else's experience of them is. I do these talks for
Yeah.
this organization named Vistage, CEO groups.
Yeah.
A lot of entrepreneurs should know about Vistage. It's very
Yes.
helpful. I was in
Yes.
it for a decade when I owned my business, the last decade that I owned the business. And so many of these CEOs will say, oh yeah, if you ask our employees, they're going to give us all 5s. And so we do ask the people that report to the executive team. They don't. They say often it's
No.
a culture of frustration. and fear because of lack of communication, too many initiatives, and too many competing priorities. And so what people do is their ego is running the show at work, not their essence, not their heart, not their conviction, as you said, not their what they can contribute. And so there's so much work between the leader within, meaning the chief, whether it's an executive director of an NPO or regular for-profit company, but then with how they treat each other. I just got CC'd on blind copied on a note today. This guy put on, calling out an SOS. I have an executive team at each other's throats, and it's killing culture. I'm like, yes, of course. And the person referred them to me and said, there's no one better at intervention than this woman. And he's my peer. Like, he could go in and do that, but he didn't offer to do it. And people often do send me in to do that level work because it's hard. You've got to hold the space that people are higher than they think they are, like their highest level of intelligence, their highest level of consciousness. You've got to hold the space for them to see what they can't see, and to really come to terms with it doesn't mean I'm a bully or I'm a jerk or I'm damaged or I'm an a-hole. What it means is I'm misguided right now. My behavior is aligned with my fear, not with my courage. And I mean, that's what I saw for myself. That little girl, that middle school girl that got into the most popular group for being mean to people, that was all my fear of being lost and alone and in that room again, rocking myself, versus this is who I am. Do you like me or not? And often, let's go to the leaders. Who's running these companies is 95% of the time our subconscious programming, which is developed before we're 8 years old. So whatever stories or beliefs or trauma we're outrunning or insecurities, when our buttons are pushed, that's what shows up. When you think you're going to lose your number one customer, when you're told that everyone can't go to work because we're in COVID, or in California, a new law that everybody gets much more time off. And now you see how Amazon is responding. Mandatory, everybody must come back to work 5 days a week. That's all fear. It's all fear. They don't know how to inspire people to be more productive. So they're going to make them come to work, and they're going to think that people are going to be more productive. What are you going to do? Police them? Not. That wasn't happening before. Nobody's good at management. It's not going to happen again. We need there's a better way. If we could tap people into their intrinsic calling, their purpose, why they're working, if we could give people a light at the end of the tunnel, people be more inspired. If we stop having people do things that make no sense, that are boring meetings, or if we'd stop letting people's egos run their departments, things would be healthier. Anyway.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Soapbox done. I like it.
Now you know what I do all day.
Right? Yeah. No, but it's the truth, and I think that I know you've got such an interesting perspective, not only from all of your experience in working in the guts of these companies, starting with the leaders, but all of your former experience in recruiting, like knowing obviously you get a pretty intimate view of what the employer wants, and then you get an intimate view of what the employee or potential employee wants. But what I find to be the case so often is that this person is not speaking to this person about that, and vice versa. And so the expectations are so completely unclear. The expectations about the vision that we're on, the path that we're on, the mission that we're on as a company, whether you're a nonprofit or not, is so unclear. That you, as that middle person, had to have had such a unique view of that perspective from both sides. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. Yes. So in recruiting, if you're good at it, and if you can make it in a straight commission job over a year, and you can feed your family, that's a sign you're pretty good at it. So we knew, and there's a finite amount of reasons people leave. We knew why people were leaving. We knew why people were staying. We knew
Mhm.
why people were joining. So that is the path that
Mhm.
got me into the track I'm at now. So one of the
Yeah.
things that happened, it was one of the many recessions. Actually, I think it was after 9/11. So Y2K, everybody was going crazy in recruiting. Everybody was so busy. And then after
Yeah.
Y2K, things came to a dead halt. And
Mm.
being the child of an addict, I thought it was my fault.
Of course,
And like,
everything is your fault,
I
don't you know, Margaret?
that's right. I started calling my clients and saying, "Have I done something wrong? You're not calling." And then they were like, "No, we're slow. We're slow. We're not hiring. We're not hiring." And so I called all my competitors because I was on the board at the time, the National Association. Everyone was like screeching halt slow.
Wow.
So in the conversations with my clients, I said, if you weren't going to hire, what would you have me doing? And they said, we love the way that you take down our role specifications so you can help us be more clear about expectations. So I developed this
Mm.
process. Actually, I was trained a part of the process by one of my mentors, one of the many people who made an impact in my life, Terry Petra out of Minnesota. And he taught me this process years and years and years ago. And that was, what was the purpose of the role? Why did the role exist? And
Mhm.
then it was, how will performance be measured? And then it was, what's the selection criteria for a person that could achieve those performance goals and live into that purpose? Now, I have
Mm.
multiplied that by 10. And when we work with organizations on culture, the first thing we'll do is, what's your noble cause? Now they'll spout off their mission statement and, we serve people in the blah, blah, bloody, 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 blah. Not
Yeah.
interesting at all.
Right.
Like, for example, this one guy goes on and on about how they're in the commodities business and they grow grain. He's reading and reading and reading and reading. And I was so bored. I said, so in one sentence, what do you do? He said, we feed the world. I said, why don't you put that on the bumper sticker?
Right, put that on the
Um,
wall, bro.
yeah.
That's great.
And their issue was employee engagement with the people shoveling the grain.
Hello.
So with these job descriptions, now I told you I moved to Silicon Valley and brought my hiring process. It was this process. At the time, it was 2012, and we were calling it conscious hiring. The VC,
Mm.
one VC said to me is, what do you mean? Are people dead when they're hiring? To her, unconscious meant dead, like
Well,
in a coma.
practically, in a lot of ways, man. Yeah, but
Yes, but she didn't wanna hear that explanation. She had
wow.
us change the company to keen hiring because, um,
Wow.
that was and actually it was better and more salable.
Yeah.
Anyway, the process of identifying the ultimate reason the role exists, how performance will be measured, where the candidate or employee will spend their time, not like a task list, because that's what most people would say, oh, they're going to do this, they're going to do this. And I'm like, of course, people aren't enrolled in your job because it's just shoveling and sweeping. Where's their time being spent in the hierarchy of contribution? What percentage is spent in strategy? What percentage is spent in client experience? So we had to pop them up because most people are hiring people to get shit done. They're not hiring people to make a contribution, and that's where it's
Yeah.
broken. If they would just pop
Mm.
up
Oh,
by
that's so good.
30,000 feet, everything
Yeah.
would change. And then what are the behaviors that the right person, not their resume, because half the resumes are bullshit anyway. Their
Right.
friends are their references. I mean, God, let's get real here. So it was,
Yeah.
what if we did a DNA X-ray on the right behaviors the role would have? If the role could talk, what would the role say it needs to produce those results, to live into that intent? And so we called this process keen hiring. And then there was behavioral interviewing questions, and then there was a behavioral interviewing guide, and then it would teach people how to score them. So it was a workflow for behavioral interviewing. Well, that
Yeah.
all fell apart when I broke the engagement with that guy because he was doing some corrupt things, my partner, so-called. And it
Mhm.
took me a year and a half to get the intellectual property back, which we can talk about if there's time.
Wow.
But
Wow.
as soon as yesterday, I'm on the phone with a vice president of investments for another client, and he's hiring he's an executive vice president hiring a vice president, which I don't get all these titles. I think they're kind of crazy. But I said, well, what is the person expected to do? And what does he do? Just like they did in the 90s. He starts listing off tasks. I said, Eric, no. What is the ultimate reason this role exists? And Eric is a highly paid tech guy in a financial services business. And he sat a little taller and he said, that's a great question. Where do I begin? And then as I start talking, he goes, Maji, I just want you to know that I was really good as a technician in my job. And as I kept getting promoted to higher and higher levels because I was really good at my job, I never once had management training. Nobody ever told me about this thing called an ultimate intent. And he was kind of justifying and wanted me to know he wasn't a dummy. And I said, and I told him to read the E-Myth book about the pie maker. Like she loved making pies until.
Do you want to own a bakery? Do you want to own a bakery? Yeah.
Right. But even
that's such a good book. Yeah.
That book is even good for people who are like promoted to their highest level of incompetency. Because if you want to lead people, you can't be doing everything. You have to delegate. Otherwise, why have them there? So I was with him for 2 hours yesterday, and he was such a great student. He got back on a call this morning. He had an intent for his department, the ultimate intent for his department. He had an intent for the role. He had the key performance indicators. He had the core functions, and he had the selection criteria. And then he says to me, okay, so I'm going to do a great job of using your behavioral interviewing guide to interview for this job. But what do I do with all the people on the team currently who might not have those behaviors?
Yeah, that's a great question.
You got to coach them up. And then the punchline of the whole thing is he's not been accountable for holding people accountable.
Yeah.
He's not been accountable for giving people clear boundaries. This goes back to your originating question. People didn't have clear job descriptions. They didn't have clear boundaries of what they needed. They don't know what it means to win or not win in that job. So, he's upset because something is due to a customer Friday at 5:00 and the guy's checked out for the weekend and not checking email. And so he's got to do the guy's job. His boss has got to get involved. And ultimately, it always goes back to the leader. Have you been clear about what you need? Do people know where the lines are? Are you holding your lines? So the last thing he said to me today is, I love my coach. My coach helps me with my self-esteem, but I need my ass kicked. So will you kick my ass once a month?
Yes, that's awesome.
I said, we'll talk about it, but ultimately you have to be willing to do your work. And, I told you that how I had my breakthrough was hiring a consultant. He came in, he said, you're not holding anyone accountable. You have a business, but you're not really running a business. It's the Margaret show. You're doing $5 million in sales and you have 4.8 million of them. Something's wrong. You don't need 14 people.
Right.
Wouldn't your life be better if you did $1 million in sales and had one employee?
Right.
And I had to really grapple with that. Just because you're making high line revenue, that doesn't mean that's your profit.
Right. So more is not always more.
That's right. What I thought was a unique problem because I was a kid of an addict. It's not a unique problem only to addicts. Accountability for others is the lowest score globally. 2 lowest scores. We give these personality assessments. They're psychometrics. I'll actually give you one if you want, Amy. It's a 79-point competency assessment in leadership. 2 lowest global scores, self-awareness. 3 lowest scores, self-awareness, emotional control, and accountability for others. So his issue, the guy I was talking to yesterday, he needs to be liked. He's got his own subconscious programming issues from childhood. He's desperate to be liked and appreciated by everybody. So he doesn't hold anybody accountable. He doesn't have clear boundaries. And then worst thing, he does their job for them when they don't do it.
And
he's
so tough.
Paying money. But it's not just him. This is an epidemic. And I think this is the one of the root causes of the culture issue. Because when people don't do what we want, then we get angry, we get pissy, and then they get to make us wrong because our behavior as leaders was bad instead of being responsible that they're not doing their job. Anyway, I can talk about this all day
God,
long.
how do we well, I want to leave the listeners with some practical tips, like and I think you gave us some really great tips a while ago I mean, I literally was writing it down on a sticky note, like, that purpose, the how performance, well, for when people are hiring, because a lot of people are just kind of starting out, they're just starting to make that first hire. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people get it wrong in their head that they have to be at a certain level before they start implementing these types of things. But really, that's where it
Yeah.
has to start, right? Is at the very
So,
bottom when it's still easier. So
so
what's
first
what's your
and
practical tips?
yeah, first and foremost, for the queen or the king, you need to know what your ultimate reason is, your purpose, your calling,
Mhm.
what values intrinsic, not like the words that everybody puts on their wall, but like somebody told me today, joyful hustle. That's a value for her. She wants to be
Yeah.
happy. She wants to whistle while she works. That's a value
Mhm.
for her. So she can only work with other people who actually like to work. If they don't like to
Yeah.
work, they're not, if they're dragging their butt in, that's not that. So your ultimate aim, what's the environment you want around you? Do you need clean, clear, and then go make that happen? And then what's the structure, the architecture that you need in your life to live true to your ultimate aim in life? Once you
Mhm.
are clear what you need, do the same thing for your company, and then do the exact same thing for every role you're hiring for. Because what you
Mhm.
said, Amy, is so true. Lack of clarity, chaos and confusion, volatility, uncertainty. We're creating that.
Yeah.
We are culpable in the culture issue because we're not clear. And then
Yeah.
we got to be clear with the people that we play with that want to make money with us. This is what it takes to work in my company. I love you. I want to love you. And how I'm
Yeah.
going to be my best self is when you're your best self. Let's be our
That's right.
best self together. And if you can't be that at my company, I invite you to open your opportunities and look elsewhere. Because,
Yeah.
we have one life. We have 112 hours if we wake up at 5 a.m. and go to sleep at 10. We only have 112 hours every week of waking hours, and that's
Yeah.
stretched. Out of that, if you own your own business or you're in a management position, 60 hours, half of that time, over half of that time is going to the job.
Yeah.
If you're doing more than you need to do, if you're doing other people's work, if you're bringing home your drama and your struggles from work or managing people, you're contaminating your personal life with your work life and
Yeah.
the not so much fun part of your work life. And so I think
Yeah.
you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your family, you owe it to your community to have clear lines of what you will
Mhm.
do, what you won't do, and what those around you need to do.
Yeah.
And there's tons of processes for that. I lay them out in the book Ignite Culture. You can find me on YouTube. We've got lots of trainings. Um, and so I hope that's clear enough of what people can do.
That's excellent. I love it. I hear you using some of that VUCA language, the volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. And that's something that I've definitely had to learn through leadership training is that when I can't deal with the polarities of life well, it does not reflect well on my team and I cannot lead them to clarity to themselves if I can't manage myself. So I love that you're opening this conversation.
Yeah, so I
Excuse
I
me.
was listening to a podcast the other day. My friend, the guy's looking for a wife, and she said, "I think you could be his wife." His name is I don't know. I'll send it to you, but uh, it, it doesn't matter what his name is. He has Your Super Life podcast, and he has this morning ritual, and I have been doing morning ritual for a long time. And he says, "Listen, folks, stuff's going to come your way that you don't want. And if you're alive, you will deal with distress. You will deal with
Yes.
pain. You will deal with things that you never picked to happen in your life. You've got to build the strength, the resilience inside to be able to deal with those ups and downs.
Yeah.
Because who got the majority of the pressure when COVID happened? Business owners. That's why they gave people the PPP. We were
Yeah.
frightened for our very survival. I have clients who lost $1 billion in a day,
Yeah.
like halt everything, which means eventually there's a trickle down to jobs.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's nuts. It's nuts. We got to be prepared. So, tell people where they can find you if they are interested in personal coaching. You come in and coach their whole team, business structure, business wide, or really more importantly, starting with that one leader and then trickling in as they learn.
Yeah, so check out margaretgraziano.com. We actually have a transcending fear and failure, moving from friction to flow free
Mm,
workbook on that website, or
oh,
check me out on YouTube, which will
love it.
the URL will be in the podcast. And my
Absolutely.
company,
Everything in show notes.
yeah, okay. And my company website is keenalignment.com.
Keenalignment.com. All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate your
Thank you,
time. Thank
Amy.
you for being my guest. And thank you for being a queen that leads.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
The Queen's Lead podcast is recorded worldwide and produced by the kick-ass media team at the Height Digital home base in Nicaragua. Until our next episode, stay real, Queens, and go lead. Remember to tap that follow and leave your review. For freebies and more real, inspiring content you love, go to amysingleton.net and connect with Amy on her socials at The Real Amy Singleton.
One more thing. This is the legal language, what my lawyer wrote and what I need to read to you. This podcast is presented for educational and entertainment purposes only. I am Amy Singleton, and I'm just your friend. Although I may speak to many on this show, I am not a psychotherapist, a business coach, a doctor, a CPA, a lawyer, or probably anyone who should be giving you professional advice. This podcast is not a substitute for a relationship with your doctor, coach, or any other licensed professional. Got it? Good. Now go be a queen and follow me at The Real Amy Singleton.